Can someone confirm if I'm audible and you can see the screen? In chat, you can confirm or you can talk. Am I audible? Can you confirm yes? In the chat, I received hi. Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's start. So welcome to this online workshop. So as you know, this is basic photography workshop. We are going to work on camera settings and composition techniques. I'll just try to go as much detail as I can. And in between, if you want, you can ask any questions. You can hold me, you can stop me in the middle, and we can discuss more on that ongoing topic. So I'm the presenter for this workshop. My name is Sumit Hooper. So just a brief introduction myself. My name is Sumit Hooper. I'm a professional photographer and digital artist. I have over 3,000 creations in online gallery. And it's already there. You must have visited my Facebook page. And I have already 3,000 galleries creations already there in my collection. So you must have visited. And you must have seen that what kind of work I'm doing there. I'm doing nature photography, I'm doing still life art, and I'm doing street photography. So yeah, I'm just trying to cover these aspects, and it'll help me to hone my skills. I'm doing this since 2017, and March 2017 I started this actively. I particularly specialized in expressive portrait work because whenever I'm going on street, I try to capture portrait expressions, movements on the street, and it helps me to develop my skills. I do creative artwork using still life products or food and nature work. I like to give some canvas art touch in my all the work. That's the kind of specialty I have in my work. And I'm offering all these photography services through my website, sumitphotoworld.com. And you must have visited my website. You have seen my portfolio there. And all the photography workshop and events I'm doing under SPW Expedition. So I'm just want to concentrate myself in one part at a time. So that's why I defined all these ventures in my, you can say that whole initiative for this Sumit for the World. And this is my page profile handle, Sumit for the World. You can find me, you can use this handle, and you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, even on YouTube. Now they have page handles. Sumit for the World is my YouTube channel. And in my YouTube channel, just a brief introduction on my YouTube channel. In my brief YouTube channel, I have 3 playlists: SPW Lounge, SPW Expedition, and BTS. So SPW Lounge is basically I started to give you all information about post-processing and touching part. SPW Expedition, I'm doing all this, we can say that I'm just covering all the completed workshop gallery work. So whatever the images I'm capturing during the event, I'm just collecting and creating a small video and just publishing it there just to relive those moments. And even this online workshop I'm just going to record it and going to publish it. So it'll help us in the new photographers who want to revisit this recording. Maybe you will have some questions which we will discuss, and there'll be something out of it, and it will be learning for someone. BTS is behind the scene playlist. So I've decided whatever the work I'm going to do in going forward, I like the new projects. I'm going to prepare some behind the scene images and the videos. So how I created all those images. So this is my motto for going forward, future project works. I'm going to have some behind the scenes, complete detailed setup about this. You can subscribe this channel, and you can share your feedback, suggestions, so I can just improve the content, and I'll like to publish which you want to see on my YouTube channel. And this is a schedule for today's workshop. We'll be having 2 sessions. So we'll be having 60 minutes of each sessions. So refresh break, I'm going to take 15 minutes instead of 10 minutes because 15 minutes, I believe it is good. You can have in between, you can do refreshment, and you can have your refreshment, and you can come back again for the second session. We have extra time for Q&A session, so there'll be Q&A session at the end. So if we have some topics which we need to discuss in detail, you can keep it for the Q&A session, and we can discuss in detail. Session rules. So all participants allowed to ask questions. So this is something new. So previously I was not allowing, but now I allow participants to ask questions. So I want this to be more interactive sessions. So it will be two-way communication between you and me, and I like to be more interactive. So it'll help both. So we can have discussion instead of just responding to your queries in the chat. Participants, video, audio not allowed in webinar session. So it's just for performance purpose. So that's the only reason. So you will have better performance for this video session. And add your questions in chat box and get your answers in the Q&A session. So if you believe that your questions need some detailed explanation, and it could be different topic. So whatever the topics we are covering, which is this separate topic, we can discuss in the Q&A sessions. So let's begin. So our first topic is how DSLR camera works. So whenever we have DSLR camera, we must know that how it functions. So what are the components inside, and if we have complete knowledge of the DSLR camera body, it will really help us to improve our confidence, to enhance our confidence on the device, and we can really improve further with the camera settings and all. But we should have some understanding on the components. Like you can see the diagram here, we have two diagrams where DSLR diagram showing you at the time of not capturing image. So you can see the components. We have many components here: lens, reflex mirror, matte focusing screen, pentaprism, eyepiece, focal plane shutter, sensor, and how the light travels through these elements and reach through to our eyes through the viewfinder. So when light enters, it has to pass through the group of lenses. So there are, when you have lens on your camera body, and so there'll be some grouping of lenses inside it. So light has to pass through. For zoom lens, it'll be quite many. And for prime lens, it'll be less number of, you can say, grouping of lens, and you'll have better quality. That's why we have more better quality on the prime lens. Because the more glass you put in front of the sensor, the quality will going to degrade. Not that much, but it'll going to degrade. And when light enter through the lens, it has to reach the viewfinder, and there is a mechanism. We have a reflex mirror. This reflex mirror function is to make that horizontal light vertical, so it can reach that section on top. It's called pentaprism. So pentaprism, what is doing, it's making vertical light horizontal, so it can reach through the view, reach out to the viewfinder. So we can see that frame in front of us while we are creating a frame, capturing image. Before shooting time, it just component state, and at the moment of shooting, you can see the reflex mirror goes up, and it allows light to reach the sensor. At the end, you can see the strip line. This is the sensor where image getting recorded. So reflex mirror most of the time will be at the 45-degree angle, and when we press shutter release button, it goes up and allow the light to reach the sensor, and that's how the image getting recorded. And all things explained in these content text you can see, and it's the same what I've discussed, what I've explained here. How mirrorless camera works. So this is something new. Nowadays we are talking about mirrorless cameras, so it's better to have some understanding that how it is different from the DSLR camera, and what are the key notes or key components in the mirrorless camera. So we'll just going to compare these camera bodies. You can see the lot of components we have in the DSLR camera, and in mirrorless camera compared to this we have very few components. So we have lens, we have shutter plane is there, so and we have image sensor at the end, and there is a new component, electronic viewfinder. So this is the interesting, or the we can say the major improvement in compared to the DSLR. In mirrorless camera we have electronic viewfinder, so everything which you are going to see through the viewfinder, it is going to be live preview, and when you complete your capture, you'll complete the shot, it is going to give you the same result what you see through the viewfinder. That's the specialty of mirrorless camera. And it's having lesser we can say the lab components, and we call it mirrorless camera because there is no reflex mirror, and the mirrorless system is more simple than the DSLR. Here sensor is directly exposed to light, this generates a live preview of the scene directly onto the electronic viewfinder. So the component works same. So when we press shutter release button, it just light up the shutter plane and allow the light to reach the sensor, and that's how the image getting recorded. So more or less the process is quite same compare as if we talk about the DSLR camera, it functions the same, but the component we have is the electronic viewfinder, which is a major improvement in mirrorless camera. Benefits of mirrorless camera. When we talk about the benefits, because it's having less components inside the body, so it will going to be more compact compared to the DSLR, and it is having small sensor. So it means this camera body will be smaller compared to a DSLR, and it's making mirrorless camera easier to carry. So we can just carry it like any point and shoot camera. And electronic viewfinder, this is as I said, there's a major improvement. Final image preview appears directly onto the image sensor, offering a live preview which then displays on your rear LCD screen. And this image preview allows you to adjust settings like exposure, brightness, saturation, and contrast before taking your shot. So all these components, all these settings you can control right on the device. And when you complete your shot, you will have the final image, what you see through the viewfinder. So that's the really good advantage. Image stabilization, with lightweight the camera body, it is less prone to shaking. So sometimes it's very difficult to handheld the camera body DSLR for a long time, and with a lightweight body, it's very easy to carry it, and you will have more better improved stabilization because the body is light. You can easily hold it and you can stabilize it by just holding it with the correct posture of your device. Silent mechanism, because it's having fewer components compared to DSLR, so it is very silent the body, so there'll be less noise you will hear out of this body, and higher shooting speed with better focusing capabilities for contrast detection and high shutter speeds. Mirrorless models makes it easier for photographers to capture at faster rates. And this is really a very key note here, because it's having higher shutter speed, higher shooting speed. So when we say like this, it means the burst mode we are talking about. In DSLR camera, the burst mode give you result out of 10, around 6 images you will see they are coming in good sharp focus. But in mirrorless camera, this probability goes higher, and we'll have somewhere around 8-9 images in burst mode. Out of 10, 8-9 images will be showing, will be coming in that good sharp details. So that's the benefit of mirrorless camera. So now we'll just talk about some differences, and if we really have to go to mirrorless camera, this could be the deciding factor. Mirrorless camera are more lightweight, so this is again in the favor of mirrorless camera. Mirrorless camera offer real-time preview of exposure and contrast. So this is again advantage. Mirrorless cameras have shorter battery life due to EVF. So this is something you need to care about if you have mirrorless device or you're planning to go for mirrorless camera. It means you'll need extra backup of battery. So always carry one full charged couple of batteries with you when you are going out for a tour, for when you are trying to when you're planning for it to go for a tour and planning to spend your whole day with the camera device. You should have at least 2 batteries. Mirrorless cameras are costly, and a budget DSLR will offer the entry-level photographer more value than a budget mirrorless camera. So when I say like this, it means if you are new into photography, I advise to go for a budget DSLR camera instead of budget mirrorless camera, because budget mirrorless camera is still having higher cost compared to budget DSLR. And you will have a lot of features in budget DSLR compared to mirrorless camera. Mirrorless cameras offer fewer accessories because they are still, we can say, developing, and their accessories, and third-party companies like Sigma, like Tamron, they are still developing for mirrorless camera, and you'll find more accessories for DSLR compared to mirrorless camera, and lens mounts or attachments. Mirrorless camera shoot faster, particularly when it comes to continuous shooting or a burst of images. So burst mode I just discussed. So that burst mode is really improved in mirrorless camera. Mirrorless cameras offer more stabilization. More image stabilization means it's having lack of mirror mechanism. Reflex mirror is not there, and mirrorless camera offers more image stabilization and less shaky photos. So it's giving you more opportunity to get good sharp images with the improved stabilization. Mirrorless cameras have smaller sensor size than DSLR. So this is just, you need to understand, this makes them less ideal for low light situations. So when you're working with low light situations, like in the early hours in the morning before sunrise, or in the evening after sunset, we are doing outdoor and you don't have external source of lighting, then you need to depend on ambient light. And with the big sensor in the DSLR camera, you have better opportunity when compared to the mirrorless camera, because the sensor is small and it's not ideal for low light situation photography. Mirrorless cameras have a less accurate autofocus system. So this is something tricky, because autofocus system of mirrorless camera uses contrast detection rather than phase detection. So it cannot measure the distance between the lens and the subject as accurately as a DSLR camera can. So this is something we can say the major difference between these devices. So mirrorless camera works on contrast detection, and DSLR camera works on phase detection. So it can accurately calculate the distance between the lens and the subject. So depth of field will be more accurate when you're working with the DSLR. And that's why they are still leading the market. Now we'll just talk about some camera modes. So when we have DSLR, there will be some camera modes on the DSLR device, like P, S, A, and M modes. So we call these as exposure modes because these are designed to give you the ability to control on the exposure. P, S, A are semi modes, and M modes is, as it says, M manual modes. Semi modes, it's designed for, we can say, when you are coming out of auto mode, better to gradually go to the manual modes. And these semi modes help you to improve your ability on controlling the camera settings, and you can feel more comfortable. When you feel more comfortable with the semi modes, you can gradually transit yourself to the manual mode. Shooting modes fall into 3 categories: auto, scene, and PSA and M modes. These are the three categories: auto mode, scene mode, and these are the exposure modes, P, S, A, and M modes. In auto and scene modes, the camera controls shutter speed and aperture. So camera is going to control all these exposure controls. So camera is deciding that how the exposure will be, and it's always giving a good exposure, but at the cost of losing that, we can say, the desired result or artistic result from your device, because it's in fully auto mode. P, S, A, and M modes are also known as exposure modes and give photographers a choice as to which elements of exposure, aperture, or shutter speed they wish to control. So you can control these aperture and shutter speed using these modes. PSA, as it says, these are specifically designed to gradually help you move into the manual modes, but you can control all these components. So how the dial button looks like on Canon device, you can see this MASP on the dial button. On Canon, it is quite similar, but for shutter speed, we have TV. For aperture priority, instead of A, it's having AV. And this is the info screen from Nikon device. Because I have Nikon, so it's a Nikon device info screen, how the settings will look like in your info screen. So when you turn off LCD and press info button on the device, you will see a screen like this where you can identify what is the shutter speed you have, which mode of the camera you have, which mode you are in. And the M is for manual, and what is the aperture value you set on the device, and how the light meters look like. So this light meter will be showing when you are in the manual mode, or will be working in the manual mode only. So you can rely on the light meter when you are in the manual mode. So these are just brief details all about all these modes. Mode P is programmed modes. We'll call it as a programmable flexible modes, because here camera is going to choose different combination of shutter speed and aperture, and it'll give you optimal exposure always. And you can utilize this. I always recommend to use mode P when you want to gradually transit yourself to the manual mode. In mode P, you can take a photo, record shots, and you'll see that settings, how it looks like, and you can feed in the same settings in the manual mode, and you will get the same result. So you will have some confidence to gradually go into that manual mode. Mode S, it's a shutter priority. And the shutter priority, when we say, it means we are prioritizing shutter speed. So we are controlling shutter speeds, and camera is going to adjust the aperture automatically for optimal exposure. Mode A, as its name suggests, it's a aperture priority. Again, camera is going to control shutter speed, and aperture priority, we are going to control the aperture on the camera. And it is always giving you optimal exposure, because these are semi modes, and camera is going to control one part just to make sure you are getting good exposure. Mode M, so this is manual, and everyone want to go into the manual mode. And you can transit yourself into the manual mode, but it's all about how frequent you are using your device, how frequently you are doing practices. And as I said, you can use mode P, check the settings. You can you can go into the manual modes, just put same settings, and you will see the same results coming. That's how you can improve your confidence on the manual mode, and you can just play with the settings. And if you are using wrong combination in the manual mode, because sometimes it happens, it'll give you some photographs where they look overexposed, so all details lost in the highlight, and underexposed where all details will be lost in the shadows. So this is the kind of definition we have for overexposed and underexposed images. So details will be lost in highlight, we'll call it as overexposed. Details will be lost in shadows. Everything is too dark to see anything in detail, so that is underexposed. And we therefore recommend using the camera exposure indicator as your guide when choosing aperture and shutter speed. So as I said, just keep noticing the light meter on the device, on the info screen. And when you change the combinations of camera settings, just notice how it behaves, where the light meter is going. Just it's better to have little under than little overexposed, because if details lost in overexposed, you can't recover. It's not possible to recover details from the highlight, but if little underexposed image you are having, you can still manage to recover the details in post processing. In all three modes, PSA modes, exposure is automatically adjusted for optimal results. So this is something you need to keep a note of it, that these are semi modes and camera is going to adjust the exposure automatically and for optimal results. Now we'll just talk about a little bit about this exposure balance with EV. We call it as exposure compensation, and we'll have sign of plus minus. You can see the square sign, and in Nikon it's just the same. We have dedicate button, and in Fuji device we have dial button is there to control the exposure compensation. So why we use it, we'll just try to understand how to make your photos lighter and darker. If we want, we can make our images little under our little overexposed using these exposure compensation. We can define. Sometimes camera may not be able to find, or we can say not able to calculate the correct exposure. We have to help camera. It happens when there is a contrast condition where our subject is either in front of bright background or in front of dark backgrounds. Camera, it can mislead the camera sensor, and it can give you some weird results. We'll just see the examples in coming slides. Camera light meter is not error free. As I said, camera light meter can also be mislead, and with these contrasty conditions. So you have to rely on your own vision, how you see the frame, and you can adjust that. You can correct that using this exposure compensation. So we are compensating the exposure using this function on the device. Exposure compensation definition can be described as a way to override the camera metering. So we have camera metering. So we'll just have a dedicated topic in the today's session. So for the camera metering, so it is going to override those metering modes, and it'll help camera to just go against all those settings and give you the correct exposure. This works well in optimal light conditions and weather. So when you have good light conditions, it'll give you good results. Exposure compensation is only available in auto and semi-auto modes. So it can help you, but it is available only in semi modes, P mode, S mode, and A mode. So these are just example photos I have from internet. And you can see this image with the white background. When we are on the zero exposure compensation, we have quite, you can say, dull photo. So it's not the desired one. So if we add more exposure, +1, +2 value, you can see that white is showing pure white. And if we go to the negative values, it is going to further darker the image. And when we have conditions where photos are coming too bright, we can use negative values to make photos little darker just to compensate the exposure. So make it look more balanced. And if we are getting too dark image, we can add more exposure. So image will come little lighter by adding plus values. And you can see this example of portrait. This is on the studio light. In studio light condition, we can still have exposure compensation in our favor, where you see that -3 exposure compensation, it's further darker the background. You can see the background difference, and with -2, it's allowing little more light from the background. So it's giving good separation between the subject and the background. That's how we can work with exposure compensation even in the studio light condition. So we'll talk about all these modes with little examples and what are the, we can say, the recommended values for different scenarios. For shutter speed is the length of time that camera shutter remain open and allow light to reach the camera sensor. So some many photographers call this as exposure time, because it is the time where when camera sensor remains open, so it's allowing exposure to be recorded. So 1 by 4,000 to 1 by 1,000. So these are fraction of seconds. These are really high shutter speeds to freeze fast moving objects. So when we talk about journal photos, many students in my workshop ask me that what is the good shutter speed for journal photos. So journal photos means we can capture any image even of humans when they are not doing too much fast movement, they are not running, they are just slowly walking. We can have 1 by 250 or shutter speed to capture those for even the, where you can say, slow movements at that shutter speed, and it'll give you good results. Or 1 by 160. So these are the shutter speeds we can say recommended for journal photos, where objects can be still or showing slow movement. 1 by 2 to 1 by 30. So these considered as long exposure to capture motion blur in consistent movement. When a movement is consistent, like waterfall, so water is flowing at the consistent speed, we can adjust our shutter speed to that between 1 by 2 to 1 by 30. For waterfall, recommended shutter speed is around 1 by 8. So you will see good threads of the water even with this milky, we can say, the motion in the flow. And for 2 seconds to 10 seconds, when you see single digit on your info screen, you'll understand these are seconds, not fraction of seconds. So consider this long exposure to paint with the light. So when we do light painting photography, we use these long exposures. We can capture stars, fireworks, and even to make our river water as a glass. So we can capture a photo with long exposure, and you will see that river water is looking like a glass. This is just example of shutter speed, where fast shutter speed just making that subject look static, and it's just freezing the motion. And with slow shutter speed, it's showing blurry image because motion is not freezed with slow shutter speed. So that's how the values look like on the device. The dial button is just a sample from Nikon, and the values can be as low as 30 or as high as 1 by 4,000. Some device supports 1 by 8,000 also. And when we change values from one to other, it can be decrease or increase. So we call that as one step. So when we change value, we'll call that as one step of uh, one stop of change in this shutter speed. And for handheld shutter speed, there is a thumb rule that when shooting handheld, use shutter speed equal to or faster than one divided by their focal length. So whatever the focal length of lens you have, like 50 lens you have, you can have shutter speed equal or faster than 1 by 50. So it could be 1 by 60 shutter speed that will work with 50 lens. And this rule applies with all the focal length. But when you are doing handheld, it means the camera is not placed or mounted on the tripod. You can work with this handheld shutter speed. And when you are in manual mode and you try to go down below 30 seconds, it will show bulb mode. So in the bulb mode, you are going to control that when to open the shutter and when to close the shutter. So when you press shutter release button once, it will open the shutter in the bulb mode. And when you press the shutter release button again, it will close the shutters. That's how we complete long exposures beyond 30 seconds using the timers and the remotes. So handheld techniques, so how we hold the camera. in hand. So if the because when you are having handheld, even with the stabilization on, if we have good posture, we can get good images even with the slightly slower shutter speed, supported by the stabilization and the vibration reduction. So these are the techniques. The knee bend, we can just bend over one of the knee, and we can just make our knee the platform where we can stabilize the device. We can find something, it can be a rock or some platform where we can place our elbow and plant it like a stand, and we can stabilize the device for better exposure, more better, we can say, the sharp images. The T-Rex is a quite orthodox way where we have the device and we can just place our elbow near the body and just make our hand like a platform where we can place the device, and these fingers must be free, the where you are holding the device. Because I'm using left hand, so I'm just making sure my thumb and finger is free to work with the focusing ring. So when you're working with a situation where you're dependent on manual focus like a macro photography, we can use this for just work with the focusing ring to adjust the focus. And it is always giving you better stability when you are having your elbow near to the body. Just stick to the near to the body, and you'll feel that it's more stable, and you can get good sharp images. Many people are concerned about that, why their images are not sharp, even they are in having good settings. So because they are not using good technique to hold the device. The tout strap is something like that. You are holding the device on the neck with the strap and just stretching it just to make it more stable. Now we'll talk about aperture. So for the definition, the aperture, we call it as f-stop, controls the amount of light reaching the sensor through the lens. And we sometimes call it as a eye for the camera device. And the more it open, that it allow more light to come in with small f number. And when we have very big f number, it is like that closing very small amount of light can reach the sensor. And the aperture size will regulate the depth of field. So it decide that how the depth of field will be. So depth of field, something like that, if we are focusing on a subject, so anything behind and in front will be in focus. So this is, we call it as a depth of field. For 1.4, it can create good bokeh. Many art lens for portrait photography comes with the f1.4 because they are specialized, and they are really good for low light conditions. They create good bokeh effect. And f2.8 to 5.6 good for portrait photography and sports photography, because it is making sure that your subject will be in good focus, and it is giving you enough depth of field to cover your subject, because you will be at some distance. And f5.6 is kind of thumb rule for portrait photography when you are taking close-up portrait photos. So it'll make sure that your subject face will be having good focus. Like if you're focusing the subject, always focus on the eye. It could be any living subject, and it will make sure that some part in front and some part in behind will be in good focus. Like it is giving you enough depth of field to cover nose and the ear. So these should be showing in the details. So that's why it's recommended when you start photography, when doing portrait work, try to stick around 5.6. And f8 to f16, good for landscape to get increased depth of field. So when we do landscape photography, we will have somewhere around between f11, somewhere around f11, because it is giving us infinity depth of field. So when we have a lens, there is a one infinity symbol, and that only, we can say, come into that action when we are in these aperture modes or aperture values like f11. So it will make sure everything in the background will be in good focus, not in a good focus, but it should be just enough focus, we can identify what is in the background in the landscape. So if even if a small building or even any element in the background, it could be mountain, so you can identify, it's not blur out, it'll give you enough visibility, you can identify what is that element in the background. F16 to F32, it's good for long exposure because it stops light and it creates starburst effect. So if you are using long exposure with these values, you can get starburst effect with the lens. Yeah, I've tested it with the 50 mm lens, and it is giving really good results. You can test the long exposure with these values, and with we can say the small focal length, you will have better opportunity to see the result. Just a small example here for depth of field. So you can see these images where large f number is small aperture, and it increased the depth of field. You can see the hole. That's why we call this as a camera eye, and you can see all the boxes showing in good focus. And image on the right side, you can have small f. You see the small f number is equal to large aperture, decreased the depth of field. So we have focus in the middle box, and you can see some boxes behind, some boxes in front are out of focus and not in focus, I should say. So you can see the camera eyes is completely wide open, and it's allowing more light, but at the cost of depth of field, and we are using in our favor for most of the time portrait photography. Even in the wildlife photography, we do this to create more creative results. Aperture values in the dial button, again, it's a sample from Nikon device, and values can be as low as 1.4, f1.4, and as high as f32. Depend on the lens. Again, it depends on the lens, what are the aperture values it is supporting. So f1.4 will be very large aperture, 2.8 will be, we'll call it as a large aperture, not very large, and medium aperture will be between 5.6 to f8, and small aperture is f11, from where the small aperture starting, and very small aperture is f22. So the small depth of field, you can see when we have a large aperture, we'll have small depth of field, image will be lighter. When we have high f number, so we can say the small aperture, the depth of field will be large, but at the cost of the light, image will be darker. So you need to have good light, you need to work in good light conditions, supporting light conditions to work with the small apertures. Now we'll talk about ISO sensitivity. ISO sensitivity is a measure of the camera's ability to capture light. So it's the camera, we can say the component or the function which allows camera to sense light. Digital camera converts the light that falls on the image sensor into electrical signals for processing. So it is going to convert the light which is falling on this image sensor into electrical signals, and it processes, and it is, we can say, process and create an image for us after processing. ISO sensitivity is raised by amplifying the signals. So it amplifies the signals. In other words, if ISO sensitivity is raised from 100 to 200, while aperture is left unchanged, we can capture same exposure. We can achieve same exposure with the shutter speed twice as fast. So if you see the shutter speed is not good enough, if you are in, we can say, aperture priority, you can raise the ISO, you'll see the shutter speed is going up. So you can have good shutter speed with little high ISO. If you raise ISO sensitivity, you can choose faster shutter speed and reduce camera blur. So it'll help you to get handheld shutter speed. This is why people say that ISO sensitivity should be raised if lighting is poor. So we have to rely on ISO only when it demands. So when we see light condition is not supportive, we can take a help from the ISO. We can raise it, but only just till that amount which is required for handheld photography when you do not have tripod. No flash, low light photography. So while lighting is poor, when lighting is poor, you can use a flash to light portrait subject. flash units, however, have a limited range. So flash units are having limited range. So like this flash, for example, this is a basic flash, and this one is advanced flash. So both are having their function, but they have limited range. So this basic flash is having around of a coverage for around 20 feet, and this is having advanced flash, it is having coverage around 40 feet. So this is the difference, and the quality also uh, quite improved in the advanced flash. So the exposure, the lighting you will get in the advanced flash is far more improved. So it all depends on what device, what flash you have. If you raise ISO sensitivity, you can optimally expose both the portrait subject and the background without using flash at all. So if you are depending on the ambient light, you can raise the ISO, and you can get better results even with the high ISO if your device supports that much ISO, because most of the device have different we can the capability to support high ISO. So you need to check. You can capture same image with same light condition with different ISO, and you'll see that how the result is coming at different ISO values, and you can decide that which ISO value works well with the high ISO value works well with your device. The example here, you can see the photo taken with the flash on the left, and image on the right is photo taken without flash, only with the high ISO sensitivity. You can see the background, the ambient, everything is getting captured with the help of high ISO. But when we are working with the flash is limited range. Please keep yourself muted. Okay. Okay, sorry. Okay, if you see this image on the left, the flash is being used where flash is having limited, we can say, the ability to travel. As I said, basic flash can travel around 20 feet, and advanced flash can have 40 feet and even beyond that. So it all depends what flash you have, and you'll see anything in the background is showing dark because the flash is not having that much reach. But with the ambient light with high ISO, we can still manage to capture the image with a good depth in this background with this ambient lighting. Noise at high ISO. So if we raise ISO, it means we are doing a lot of good things. We are allowing fast shutter speed or reducing camera blur caused by the subject or the camera movement. But in fact, raising ISO sensitivity can introduce type of image artifact known as noise. So we'll see some grainy effect in the images with high ISO. So we call that as noise, and that grainy effect sometimes look good if you want to create some vintage kind of feel out of it, but it'll not help you if you want to show some details, because if you are going to show some details, it is going to show more noisy image. You see the image down here, for example, at 12,800 it's showing too much grainy effect, but at ISO 100 it's very clean image. So that's how the grainy effect comes. So I always recommend, when you have a lot of grainy effect in your image and you want to retain that everything is cool, you don't want to just apply a lot of noise reduction, and better to convert that image into black and white. So instead of working on noise reduction, convert that image into black and white, and you can still have that image, and with the some details, whatever the details you can see in the image, with black and white can feel that the quality is totally different, and we can still work with that. Raising ISO sensitivity amplifies the electrical signal, which also amplifies any noise in the signal. As a result, the higher the ISO sensitivity, the more obvious the effect of noise on your photographs. So the more ISO value you will have on your device, depends on your capability, how it's dealing with the ISO, you will see more effect on your photographs. The same is true of all digital cameras. We recommend to you raise the ISO sensitivity only as high as needed to avoid blur. So I raise it till the point where when you see that its shutter speed is good enough for handheld photography, so you can avoid the camera blur. And ISO sensitivity can be set manually by the photographer or automatically by the camera. So you can have auto ISO enabled, turned on in your device. Nikon device, we have option to set minimum shutter speed. So we can set minimum shutter speed, what is depend on the focal length of your lens. So like if you are working with the 300 lens, you can have shutter speed of somewhere around 1 by 320 or 1 by 500, just to make sure you will not lose the moment, and shutter auto ISO is not going to take down all that shutter speed to low. So you'll see that image is not coming good, because shutter speed is defined at the minimum shutter speed value, where it will not go below 1 by 500. So if you have defined 1 by 500 will be minimum shutter speed, it will not go below that. You can define, you can set in the auto ISO settings. Okay, now we'll just work on the camera simulator app, and we'll just try to play with the settings, what we have learned so far for the exposure modes. Mhm. The site is not working. Just check. Oh, sorry, there is some problem with this site. Strange. Okay, let me share this link with you. Okay, I just shared this site link. You can test it on your computer, and just you can just play with the camera settings. There looks to be problems with this site right now. Oh no, some problem with this site. Unfortunately, this site is not working right now. Yeah. So previously it worked. Maybe there is some maintenance, some problem, because it's a site we do not manage, so we can't control. I'll find some other solution, some other simulator, and I'll share you on the email, because you have registered. I'll send you the link on the emails where this similar simulator or this one is working. And sorry for this, I was not able to demonstrate, but let me explain you how this works. We have a manual mode, we have shutter priority, we have aperture priority. So we can play with these modes in this simulator app. And here, if you are in manual mode, you can change the aperture and shutter speed. You can just you can define different combinations of aperture and shutter speed and see the results. We can change the setting of ISO. If we are in shutter priority, you will see that only shutter speed section is only enabled. Aperture will not be enabled for you to make any change, because when you change shutter speed, aperture will change automatically. In aperture, it is going to just work opposite. You can only change aperture value, and shutter speed is going to change automatically. And you can change the ISO just to compensate the light. If you see shutter speed is going low in the aperture priority, in the aperture priority mode, you can change the ISO and you will see that shutter speed is raising. So at the same ISO setting, you will get the higher shutter speed. Yeah. Okay, let's move ahead. So the next section is focusing mode. So we'll talk about focusing modes because it's very critical. If we understand how focusing mode works on the DSLR camera, we'll be having more control and we'll know that which mode is used for which kind of photography. So there are two modes. We'll talk about each in detail. So one shot focusing mode. This is one shot AF in Canon, and one shot we call that mode as a one shot mode. And in Nikon we call this as AFS, which represents single focus capability. So when you press shutter release button halfway, it'll only focus once and it'll not keep recalculate the focusing. If there is a we can say the movement by the subject or you are changing your position, the camera is not going to calculate that focus again. So you can lose the focus. If there is a movement by you or by the subject, you will lose the focus. You need to keep refocusing manually because it is going to take focus calculation once. In this mode, when you depress the shutter release button halfway, camera focuses on the subject just once. There is no continuous adjustments. This mode saves battery power and is ideal for subjects that aren't moving. So if you see that you are going to work on a photography where you see the subject is not going to do too much movement, better to be on this one shot and AFS mode, and it will save a lot of battery and you will feel that you are able to work with the single battery for a longer time compared to the other modes. So what is that other mode? This is continuous focusing mode. So AI servo AF, AI servo we call this in the Nikon, in the Canon device, AFC in the Nikon device, and it stands for continuous focusing. So continuous focusing mode. So this mode is most useful for keeping moving objects sharp within the viewfinder. So you need to track your subject. You need to keep your focal point right on the subject. In continuous focusing mode, the camera detects the subject's movement and refocuses accordingly to keep this object sharp as a tag. So it's better advised to use this continuous focusing mode. And for practice purpose, what you can do, you can focus on your subject, and it could be your friend or family member. You can ask your subject to either go further away from you or come near to you while you are focusing with the AFC mode, continuous focusing mode. So what the camera will do, by the time you complete the shutter release button, capture that shutter release button, you will see that it's always giving you sharp images, or we can say you will not lose the focus on the subject. That's the benefit of using continuous focusing mode, but it uses a lot of battery power. And because it is continuously doing focusing, and it consumes a lot of battery power, and it's only advised when you really need continuous focusing mode. That's how the cameras, that's how the settings will look like on the device. The left image is from the Nikon and the right image is from the Canon. Automatic autofocus mode. So as its name suggests, it's the automatic mode of autofocus. So a camera is going to decide that if it should be in the AFC or it should be in the AFS. Like it would be when there is a movement by the subject or you are doing a lot of movement, then the camera will take that image that as a subject is moving, and it is going to take images in continuous focusing mode. And if there is not so much movement, it will think that subject is still, and it is going to take photo in AFS, one shot, single focusing mode. And sometimes we have to create some artistic photography, do some artistic work. With purpose, we can make our elements in the in the frame out of focus. Something in the foreground, something in the background. We want to have some different artistic touch. So we can decide where we want to focus. That's how we can create artistic work. This mode maintains focus if you change subject or subject moves. So as I said, if there is a movement by the subject or you are doing movement, the camera will change that focusing mode, depends on that. Manual focusing mode. So as the name suggests, we are not going to rely on the autofocus. We are just turning the autofocus off by using switch on the lens, on the device, even on the settings in the camera. So always utilize the switch where possible. If you have switch on the lens on the device, use that switch to turn off the autofocusing instead of going into the settings, because sometimes it's not easy to quickly change the settings from the camera settings, and better to use switch. This is MF and Nikon, which stands for manual focus. On many lenses, you would see AF MF switch for focus mode selection. Manual focusing the camera is perhaps the most frustrating barrier between the good and great photography. We struggle with the manual focusing, and it happens because initially when we do photography, we want everything to be in good, sharp focus details. So when we start learning, we do some creative work, we understand that it's beyond focusing, and sometimes we want things to be go out of focus for just to get some creative results. So we can rely on that manual focus, and it'll really sometimes give you great results. You can't even imagine what kind of results you can get with the manual focusing. Achieving perfect focus requires using the distance measurement tape on the lens barrel, and even perhaps measuring the distance from the lens to the subject with a tape measure. Many documentary photographers, they carry measurement tape with them, and they calculate the distance between the subject and the camera, and that's how they accurately calculate the depth of field. This will give you most accurate focus point. Manual focusing mode. So there is a diopter adjustment on the device. You can see this picture here. So what is doing? It is just adjusting that viewfinder ability according to your eyes. If there is irregularities in your eyes, like you have specs, you can adjust this diopter adjustment, and you don't need to wear your glasses. The specs you don't need to wear while using DSLR. And you can also use depth of field preview button. There is a PV button on some device you can find. What it'll do, it'll just give you kind of live preview effect. What we get in the mirrorless device, you will see that how the final image it will be. Manual focus is essential when you focus on non-traditional subject. For example, a subject that is in the background when the foreground is busy or dominating. So if you have a lot of movement in the foreground and you're trying to focus in the background on some subject, sometimes it's very difficult to get your subject in the focus. So we can rely on the manual focus. Focus indicators blinking keeps work even when you are in manual focus mode. So this is kind of experience I'm just sharing here. So even if you're in the manual mode and you press your shutter release button halfway and you make a change in the, you can try to calculate the or make the subject look in focus using focusing ring. If you adjust the focusing ring and while pressing the shutter release button halfway, you will see at some point when subject is in good focus, that blinking that keeps blinking while you're trying to focus, it'll stop. It'll just let you know that the subject is in good focus even when you are in manual mode. And in Canon device, it beeps. It makes a beep sound in Canon device when you try to use same technique. And it helps when you are in working in extremely low light condition where you are not able to easily identify, and you have to just rely on your own vision that the subject is coming in the sharp or not. There you can utilize this technique. Now we'll talk about metering modes. The metering modes are one of the most powerful and underutilized setting on your digital camera. How often do you change your metering mode? So just a question for you. You can reply on the chat. How often do you work with the metering mode? Okay. You can reply on chat if you really utilize this metering mode setting or not, or you're always working with the default one, the matrix metering and the evaluative metering. You can talk, that's not a problem. I want this session to be interactive. Okay, working with the default one. Okay. Okay, no problem if you don't want to talk, but I want this session to be interactive. Okay, best photographers always starts with the best original photo, and that can only happen when you get a proper exposure, and getting a proper exposure depends heavily on your how you control your camera metering mode. So when you start when you start working on the metering modes, you will see it's giving a lot of improvement in your current present work. At the present level of photography, you will see a lot of improvement when you know when and where to use these metering modes. We'll just try to understand these metering modes in details. In Nikon, we have matrix metering, center weighted metering, spot metering. In Canon, we have evaluative metering. It's equivalent to the matrix metering mode. And partial metering mode is something we can say additional in Canon. In spot metering, we have in the Canon in center weighted metering. We have the same, but the partial metering mode is something we can say the advantage for the user, Canon users. So what is default or the we can say the matrix metering mode, evaluative metering in the Canon. So default metering mode is for the most DSLR, it reads the light from the whole scene and calculate the average exposure for those different elements. So when you have default metering mode, it is going to take light exposure calculation average value all from the all elements what we can see in the frame. It is going to calculate the average exposure, and based on that it will decide if your image going to come underexposed or overexposed or balanced. So it measures several points from around the frame and calculates the average exposure. It is biased to the focus point selected. So whichever the focal point, if you are in a single focus point, so whichever the focal point where you are keeping that, it is going to be take most of the calculation around that. It also takes account several factors, including the distance to the subject, how far you are to the subject, from the subject, colors of the scene, and focus area and other elements. In order to find the best exposure for the whole scene. So it is going to calculate all these factors, counting all these elements, and based on that, it is going to decide that what will be the final exposure. This mode is excellent under the following circumstances. You want to work fast with minimal change in settings. The light condition is changing quickly. You are covering actions and angle to the subject is changing quickly. So if you are covering an event photography and there are a lot of change in the angles and you are trying to capture some moments. So with matrix metering mode, most of the time you'll see that you can work with easily. The lighting and contrast are not extreme. So when there is not much contrast in the lighting, you can easily work with the matrix metering. So this is just example how actually it calculates, how it sees the frame. So it is going to read the exposure from the whole frame, and that's how it actually works. In some cameras, extra weight is given to the point that is near to the focus point that is being used. So as I said, if you are working with the single focal point, like one single focusing mode, like AFS or one shot, it is going to give the more weightage to the that focal point around that. Center weighted metering. So as its name suggests, so it's going to take exposure from the center, and the value would be somewhere around 60 to 80% of the actual frame. And it will we feel that when we have our subject right in the center, we are using center weighted metering. So it is designed for that purpose, where we see that subject will be going to be in the center. This mode operates under the assumptions that you will most likely center your subject in the viewfinder. When would you use this? So when you're going to choose center weighted metering mode, it's perfect for event situations like wedding, because there are a lot of backlighting coming in the background. So if we are working with the center weighted metering, you can have better results. You can manage with that matrix metering mode, but you can have better results with center weighted metering. You don't want the background to influence your metering reading. So the same one, you trying to meter a light from object against a dark background or vice versa. So again, we are working with different contrast lighting conditions. You want to keep your subject centered within the frame, such as the portrait. So most of the time when we are taking portraits, we are using center weighted metering, and we want that most of the calculations coming from the center. So there'll be not much compromise, and we'll see that better results. This is the example of center weighted metering. Most useful in event photography, where the use of spot metering mode is not practical. So we'll just get more details out about the spot metering mode, but where spot metering mode is not practical, we can work with center weighted metering. So now we'll talk about spot metering mode. In this mode, this is the most accurate and the very hardest metering mode, because it is going to take all the calculation, or we can say the most of the calculations from that spot, and only 1 to 5% of the total image area that you see in your viewfinder. So it's only taking exposure calculation, the average value only from that 1 to 5%. So that's why it's very hard and very most accurate. So if you have your subject in front of bright background, like in a daytime, if you use spot metering, you will see that the face is not, we can say, the sellout. So you will see the good exposure on the face if you're using spot metering mode. It usually represents by a small red dot and fixed directly in the center when you see through the viewfinder. You would use it by pointing it at the subject element that you want to take the meter reading from. So you have to have your focal point right on the subject. The spot metering mode is extremely useful. It allows you to exactly fine-tune your exposure. The camera won't be fooled by extreme contrast condition, because it is taking all the exposure calculation right from the spot. You can get an accurate meter reading from an object where you have set the focal point. So again, where we are setting the focal point, it is going to take all the calculations from that point. It will allow you to accurately determine an exposure setting for a bright object against a dark background or vice versa. So again, if you're working with the lighting situation where background is too much lighting, so like in the daytime, it could be sky, or it could be other situation in the event photography, you can work with the spot metering, where you can easily use that. Otherwise, we can revert to the center weighted metering. This is the example, the photo taken with the spot metering mode, because I found the background was having too much light. So, and this animal was in the shadow, and I found this spot metering mode helped me to get the better result. Make sure you always check your camera metering mode before shooting to ensure you're getting correct exposure. So this is the key to get correct exposure always. So always check that what is the metering mode you have on your camera, and try to work with different metering modes, and you will see that how the result is coming, and you'll get a lot of confidence on that. Partial metering mode. So it is quite similar to the spot metering mode, but it's giving you, we can say, the more little larger area. So instead of 1 to 5%, it is giving you 10 to 15%. So from where the light is going to be measured. And this mode serve as the middle point between the spot metering mode and the center weighted metering mode, because in spot metering it's 1 to 5%, and center weighted metering it is 60 to 80%, and it is somewhere in the middle, 10 to 15%. Similar to spot metering mode, it is useful when some areas of the scene would affect the overall exposure, making it too dark or light. It has few benefits. It creates a tight, accurate reading from approximately 20% of the image area. Works like the spot metering mode, but takes into account a larger area. The metering area is often adjustable, allowing you to move it around the viewfinder. So you can see if you're working on the Canon device, you can adjust that from where you want to calculate the exposure. Use center weighted metering mode instead of partial metering mode if that is not available on your cameras. For the Nikon users where partial metering mode is not available, and you can utilize that center weighted metering. Okay, I believe this is a break time. We'll just take a 15 minutes break. Okay, just get back in 15 minutes. Just have some refreshment. Okay, welcome again. So now we will talk about composition techniques. So whenever we talk about composition techniques, it's always starts with rule of thirds. Even the device manufacturers have their device grid view enabled. So when you are in LCD view, you can press the info button, and you will see at one point you will get a grid view on the device on your LCD. So you can use rule of third there. So what is rule of thirds? It's a way of dividing frame in 9 equal parts, where we are having two horizontal line and two vertical lines dividing crossing each other uh, like this. And there so our elements, so whatever the interesting elements, even the subjects we have, it should touch these lines. So if we have our subject or interesting element in the frame, we should have around these focal points. So these are the crossing where the lines crossing each other, these are we call focal points. So these are the focal points where we should keep our interesting elements around. And if it's having right on the line, on one of the line, then we'll call it as a rule of third. Here I'm in this image, I've applied rule of third. I placed my subject on the vertical line, and using the horizontal line for just to add and for just to enhance the view. And that's how we utilize. It's most of the time we'll see the images where we have some negative space, some empty space in the frame. And all you need to do is divide your frame vertically into 3 equal parts, horizontal and vertically into 3 equal parts. And by placing your subject on one of your the four focal points, 4 points where these dividing lines meets, you will encourage the viewer away from the center of the frame. So the technique, the basic idea about this composition technique that whenever we read the frame, we read the image, we always read through these focal points. So that's scientifically proved that when we read the frame, any image, we read through these intersection points, the crossing sections. This forces them to look around the image and makes your composition more interesting. So this is a just example of rule of third image. Here I applied on food photography, elements, subjects, and it's advertised style photo. And you can see this image and how I placed my focal point, the subjects around the focal point. So this is one of other example, and it's an action composition. I have objects, subject, complex visual, and with the background, and it's a really perfectly fit for this composition. You can see the elements I covered and vertical line, and even for the background. So we can see this is a very balanced composition, and using this very simple technique of rule of third. The other composition technique is isolate the subject. So here what we are trying to achieve, we are just trying to we can say hide the distractions around the subject. So there could be many different ways. Either we can do in post-processing by adding some minute effect, some we can say we can make that the elements or the surrounding darker, and it just pop up the subject. Or we can zoom into the subject. We can use zoom lens, just narrow the field. For that we'll get further close, we'll fill the frame. These are the techniques. Even we can use shadows. If you have your subject around shadows, you can use the shadows to cover the distractions or to hide the distractions. That's how we can use this technique, isolate the subject. And this is just example where I'm using a zoom lens. And with the 300 mm, I was able to isolate the subject. The tree behind the butterfly was around, I believe, somewhere around 40 feet. And I was able to completely blur out that background with the zoom lens. And this is one of the example from street photo. I was having 85 prime lens with 3.5 aperture. It was good enough to just hide the distractions in the background. Because I was just aiming for the portrait, and for me it works well. You can see the elements in the background completely blurred and not creating any distractions, which is looking good for the portrait capture on street. The next composition technique is leading lines. So whenever we have lines, which is drawing in the image, where we can use those lines to, we can say, where it'll lead to our subject. And if you notice, and the top of the building, there is a bird, and the lines around the building, it's working well for this technique. You can see how it's the lines leading to the top, and we can use this technique in many ways, even on the street, even in the wildlife. We can use surroundings, and if we find some lines, we can include in our frame. And these are just examples we can include in the in our frame. The elements, we can have some, we can say, the receding lines, and the fence draws you to the whole house, or the whole, maybe there's a crack in the concrete. So it could be any example of line which is leading to the subject. And what it is doing, it is just helping viewers to read through the line and reach the subject. So we don't need to, we can, it's a kind of, we can breaking that rule of third. So even the line starts from the rule of third intersection points. If you see this line, it's if we divide this frame in the rule of third, this live line also crossing through the intersection points. So that's how we utilize the leading lines. This is just example of, I'm using the diagonal lines, vertical lines, and there is a moment to capture. So when we have lines in our frame, and if you are able to add diagonal lines, they'll add more energy, they'll add more dimension in the frame. And even we can have diagonal line, zigzag line, and we can easily find these zigzag line example in nature. When stem is not exact, we get the straight, it's in zigzag form. Repetition, again, very easily available. We can find these compositions in nature, or we can create these compositions if we are going into for a travel photography. You can find a lot of things, because when we have shops, they must have some elements quite similar. They are placing those elements in the same pattern, and in repetition manner, you can easily create those compositions there as well. But in nature, it's very easily, you can find the patterns. Nature is a gift, and we can easily find these repetitive patterns. Even on a leaf, you can find that pattern. Anything can be arranged into a repeating pattern, can bring a great intensity to a photograph. Depending on the subject matter, it may be calming, or like a row of pillars or building, if any static elements we are having, or alarming, like endless rows of people, if people, or even if a group of we can say the animals walking or the running. So you can create those repetition patterns, which will give you different sense of feel, like alarm feeling out of it, instead of giving you calm look. If you are adding just we can say the bunch of pillars or the buildings in the repetitive manner, in the repetition composition. The concept here is they should look quite identical, very similar, like this example here. So this is just an example from street photography. We can see the pattern of lines on the road. It's looking very calmless, and it's creating harmony in the frame. Pattern's not regular. It's not necessary that pattern needs to be regular. It can be irregular, and but still creating harmony. Creating layers. So this is very interesting. I always advise to work with the creating layers, and sometimes we call this technique as a up thing, because we are what we are doing, we are just trying to simulate a 3D effect in our image, and what we are doing, we are just with purpose adding some elements in the foreground or in the background to create some layers. If you see this image carefully, I have one person in just right in front of the lens, just to make sure it'll create some layering effect. And I have second layer where I set my focus, and the third will be the background. And you can have focus on different layers, and you will see the effect of it. But mostly it is giving you more 3D effect when you are having something in the foreground and something in the background out of focus, right? Have your focus in the middle layer. So it's to give you some illusion of depth. And all these things not only fill your frame with the interesting elements, and they further you tell the story, what you are trying to tell. So your image should convey some message. Your viewer should understand or try to read through the image. That should be your aim for that. And there are 19 more types of compositions. So I have one dedicated session, online workshop, where I am going to discuss all these we can say the 24 composition techniques in 4 hours online course. And this is just a basic photography workshop where I try to cover the camera settings in depth, and with some of the composition techniques, which should give you enough, we can say, the material to work on your photography skills, and you can really improve on. If you have some notes from it, you will definitely see the results, and you'll see that it's improving with this knowledge. And just a brief review on the Stellar photo recovery software, because I am collaborated with the Stellar, and it's a data recovery software company where they develop software. They provide a software we call Stellar photo recovery, which helps you to recover data which got deleted, got damaged on your storage device. It could be memory card, it could be hard disk, and you can use this software. And if you want a free license for 1 month, you can send me email. I can help you get that 1 month subscription copy, and you can test it out. And it is really good if you are really working in daily basis with the files where you sometimes need to recover. It can help you. So just give you brief about this for this software. What are the main features and how it works? So there is option of deleted photo recovery. So this option just helps you, as its name suggests, we can recover the deleted photos, and it can be on the camera memory card, it can be on the hard drive, or any we can say the writable media where we can store the photos. We can recover that, and it supports raw file formats also. So raw file formats, sometimes the files are really huge. Even you can easily recover that using this option. Recovery from formatted hard drive. So if your drive or the memory card formatted, you can still recover the data from that. And there is an option of deep scan, and perform deep scan and recover every bit of lost or deleted photos or videos. So when there is a severely corruption in the storage, you can still recover the data using this option. There is a recovery from bad sectors. It's quite technical term. Bad sector is something, a part of your storage media where you could not even open the files. So it is not allowing you to open the files. You'll see some file is there, but you are not able to open because they are stored in the bad sectors. And there is an option in the software, recovery from bad sector. It can recover the data, and it also works smoothly with high storage capacity media of up to 6 TB. So 6 TB of capacity media, you can still use this software to recover data. SD card recovery. So as I said, it's supporting a lot of storage device, storage media. So SD cards, most of the memory cards are supported by this software. So in SD card recovery, we have dedicated option to recover the data from corrupted SD cards. And a lot of brand names you can see here. It's supporting all these brands like memory card from Sony, Nikon, Canon, Samsung, Kodak, Epson, Olympus, Panasonic, and there is many more. And even supports the drone cameras. For the rating, I gave this software rating of 4.5 out of 5 because the only reason is that when you are in the final phase of recovery, it is not allowing you to cancel the process. So you have to wait. So whatever the data, if it's a huge, you may have to spend. You may have to leave your computer turn on for a few hours, depend on the data. So that's something they can improve. And the final phase we could not halt. We have to let the computer run for that many hours. And for my next special photo walk and workshop, I have in December. It's 10th December. I have the same workshop repeated, and the online one, and in the morning. In for outdoor, right now outdoor I'm doing only in Pune city and in India. So this is the kind of, we can say, the starting point, and every month I'm doing this just to make sure anyone who want to join, they have some query from the previous session, they can join again and they can discuss in detail. So it's just an opportunity for you. I have outdoor workshops. Again, in the Pune city, I do outdoor workshop on birds photography, nature, and street photography. I'm planning for portrait too, but I'm just looking out for the better location. Upcoming online courses. So I have online courses basically around that Lightroom and Photoshop for editing, post-processing. It's a, we can say that quite, we can say full-fledged course for editing. So I'm just trying to cover from the beginning to the intermediate or quite advanced level of editing work. And flower photography. So I'm going to cover the aspects of flower photography, and it is going to improve. It is really going to help you if you are interested in flower photography. Street photography course. So it's an online course where I'm just going to cover all the conceptual knowledge, the theoretical part, and some misconception about street photography, some doubts that if we are really legible to do street photography or not. So the questions like this I discussed in detail. So now we are in a Q&A session. So it is dedicated session. So if you have any question around photography, we can discuss in detail. You can unmute yourself and we can talk if you have any question. I just invited you to unmute yourself, and if you have any questions, so whatever the topics we have covered around it or any other topic related to photography, we can discuss in detail. Okay, you want me to contact separately if after practice? No problem with that. Okay, most welcome. So it's my pleasure to share all this information, and I hope you have enjoyed this session and you will see a lot of improvement in your photography skills. And please share your feedback. You can submit your feedback on my website. Let me share the link. I'm just waiting for your feedback. Please submit your feedback, and it is going to help me enhance the experience in future events. Yep, all good. Thank you so much for joining today's session. And I'm looking forward to meet you again in some other session if you like to join in future. Thank you so much. Yep. So I'm going to conclude this now and waiting for your feedback.